Have you ever opened your bank app late at night, not even because you need to pay something, but because you're hoping the number looks different than it did this morning? Like maybe, somehow, life got cheaper while you were asleep. And you're not broke. You're functioning. You're employed. You're doing the whole adulting thing. But there's this quiet panic underneath it, where you're like, why does it still feel like I'm one random Tuesday away from stress? And if you're honest, the scariest part isn't the bills. It's the feeling that you're doing everything you were told to do, and the results are, weirdly, flat. That flatness is the lie. It's not that nothing is happening. It's that wealth doesn't show up like those smooth, polite graphs people post to feel responsible. Real financial lives move in lurches. It's long stretches of I'm grinding and nothing's changing. And then a short window where something clicks and the whole trajectory shifts. The problem is most people don't even know those windows exist. So when they arrive, they treat them like any other month. They miss the door while it's open, then spend years wondering why they're still stuck. And this is where I'm gonna annoy you a little, because I'm not going to blame your income. Income matters, obviously, but it's not the deciding factor. Two people can make the same salary and end up in totally different places. One can make half and still end up with more peace. And if that sounds unfair, yeah, it kind of is, but it's also predictable once you see what's actually deciding the outcome. Most people think the money game is about effort and intelligence. Like, if you're smart enough and you work hard enough, your finances will eventually reflect that. But money doesn't reward effort the way school does. Money rewards positioning, it rewards systems, it rewards the stuff you do when nobody is clapping, and you don't even feel like it's working yet. And that's why the struggle feels personal, when it's really structural and psychological. Your brain is built for visible wins. Investing is built for invisible wins until it's not. There are 3 milestones that act like gates, not 3 tips, not 3 hacks. Milestones, thresholds, the kind where once you cross them, the game feels different. And I'm telling you right now, the second one is where people self-sabotage the hardest, because it feels like winning. That's the trap. But before we get there, we've got to talk about the first milestone, because it's the one that makes everything else possible, and almost nobody respects it while they're in it. The first milestone is your first $10,000 invested. Not saved, invested. And I know what your brain wants to say. 10,000 isn't wealth, correct? It's not wealth. It's ignition. It's the moment the math starts to become emotional, because below 10,000, compounding, basically, a ghost. It's there on paper, but it doesn't hit your nervous system. It doesn't change the way you breathe. It doesn't change the way you walk into work on Monday. It's too small to feel, so your brain treats it like it doesn't matter. If you invest $2,000 and you get a great year, say 10%, that's $200. Congrats, that's like a couple I'm too tired to cook dinners and a Costco run. It doesn't feel like progress, it doesn't feel like power. And because it doesn't feel like anything, it's fragile. The first little emergency, the first car repair, the first life happens, and that money gets pulled right back out. Not because you're irresponsible, because you're human, and your brain prioritizes pain, relief over future benefit every single time. But at $10,000 invested, that same 10% is $1,000. Now your brain finally goes, wait, that wasn't over time. That wasn't me selling hours of my life. That was my money doing something while I was just existing. And that realization is the psychological switch. Not because $1,000 changes your whole life, but because it proves a concept your body didn't believe yet. You can generate results without direct labor. That's when people start taking the process seriously, because now it's real enough to protect. And here's the part that's low-key dark. Most people never reach this milestone because of what I call the motivation desert. It's that stretch from 0 to 10 grand where you're doing the right things, but the feedback loop is broken. It's like going to the gym for months, getting sore, eating better, skipping dessert, and still feeling like you look the same in the mirror. Eventually you start thinking, maybe I'm just not the kind of person this works for. And that thought is the silent killer, because it's not true. It's just how your brain reacts to invisible progress. So the people who cross $10,000 aren't necessarily more disciplined. They're more automated. They don't rely on vibes. They don't rely on motivation. They set it up so the decision happens once and then the system runs. Money gets invested before their I deserve a treat brain has a meeting about it. It's boring, and that's why it works. The wealthiest systems in the world are not dramatic. They are quiet and consistent and honestly kind of unsexy.
Now, here's where I'm going to open a loop and not close it yet, because this is the part most people miss. The real power of $10,000 isn't the number itself, it's the identity shift. When you finally have something invested that you don't touch, you start behaving like a person who owns assets, not a person who just earns and spends. That sounds subtle, but it's not. That shift changes what you tolerate at work. It changes how you plan. It changes how you react to emergencies. You stop feeling like everything depends on your next paycheck, and that's the beginning of freedom. Not the full thing, the beginning. But then comes milestone 2, and milestone 2 is where people get hit with the most dangerous emotion in personal finance. I made it. Milestone 2 is $100,000 in net worth. And yeah, net worth can mean a lot of things, but the vibe is simple. You finally feel like you have a base, something real, something that makes you breathe a little differently. Charlie Munger, the longtime partner of Warren Buffett, has that famous line that the first $100,000 is the hardest. People quote it like it's a hustle slogan, but it's not. It's math. Getting to $100,000 is mostly you. Your contributions, your restraint, your patience, your willingness to keep going when the progress feels slow. After $100,000, something changes. The money starts pushing back, the portfolio starts doing some of the work, and there's a crossover point, depending on returns and how much you contribute, where your annual growth can start to compete with what you're putting in. That's when it stops feeling like you're dragging the boulder alone. That's when you start to think, okay, I can see it. And that's exactly when people blow it, because the second milestone comes with a psychological reward. You feel wealthy for the first time, not billionaire wealthy, but I'm not drowning wealthy. I can exhale wealthy. And that feeling is so good that people immediately translate it into lifestyle. A nicer apartment, a car upgrade, a couple trips that go from budget cute to why is this cocktail $24, a furniture phase, a convenience phase, the I'm busy so I'll just DoorDash era, and every choice is defensible. That's why it's so lethal. It just feels like they're finally enjoying what they earned. Nobody thinks they're making a mistake, but what they're really doing is raising their baseline. And baseline spending is different than fun spending. Baseline spending is the stuff that follows you. It becomes the new normal. It becomes the new I can't go back. And once your baseline rises, you don't just need to earn more. You need to earn more forever. That's the trade nobody admits they're making. This is where two people start to separate in a way that looks confusing from the outside. Picture a teacher making $58,000 in Columbus. Normal salary, normal bills, nothing flashy. But she crosses the $10,000 invested milestone early because she automated it. Then she hits $100,000 net worth, and instead of upgrading her entire life, she keeps her baseline stable. Maybe she upgrades one thing, but she doesn't let it become her new identity. She keeps feeding the engine. Now, picture a contractor in Austin making $112,000. On paper, he should be cooking, but he doesn't cross the first milestone early because his money leaks through lifestyle. He eventually hits $100,000 net worth and finally feels that I'm good high. And then he celebrates in a way that turns his freedom into a lease payment. He's not dumb. He's not irresponsible. He's just human. And nobody told him that the most expensive time to inflate your lifestyle is right after the engine finally turns on. And here's the controversial part nobody wants to say in polite company. A lot of rich-looking people are not rich. They're just committed, like deeply committed, to spending. They're trapped in a life that requires their income to keep showing up at full volume. So they can't breathe. They can't stop. They can't take risks. They can't walk away. But hey, the kitchen backsplash looks insane. So, congrats, I guess. If you want to navigate Milestone 2 without fumbling it, the move is weirdly simple. When you hit $100,000, you don't celebrate by expanding your baseline. You celebrate by buying time. You increase your investing rate a little, just a little, 1 or 2%. Not because you hate joy, but because timing matters. The year after $100,000 is a high leverage window. That's when compounding finally has mass. Pulling contributions out right then is like cutting the engine the second the plane leaves the runway. And you might be thinking, okay, but what's the point of money if I can't enjoy it? Fair. The point isn't deprivation. The point is intention. Enjoy money on purpose. Don't accidentally turn a temporary emotion into permanent obligations, because the second you raise your baseline, you just raise the price of your freedom, which brings us to Milestone 3. And this is where the whole conversation flips, because Milestone 3 is not a net worth number. It's a ratio, and once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere, like when you learn a new word and suddenly it's in every sentence. Milestone 3 is the year your passive income can cover your baseline expenses. Not your dream life expenses, not your I want to live like an influencer in a Tuesday morning montage expenses. Your baseline, housing, utilities, insurance, food at home, transportation, the stuff that makes your life function. This is the milestone that actually equals freedom, because freedom isn't a dollar amount. Freedom is the ability to say no without your stomach dropping. And most people assume that takes millions. Sometimes it does, but the twist is it depends less on your income than on what your life costs. There's a popular rule of thumb people talk about called the 4% rule based on historical retirement research. Basically, the idea that for a diversified portfolio, withdrawing around 4% annually has been used as a rough benchmark for sustainability over long periods. It's not a guarantee, it's not a promise, it's a framework people use to estimate a target. So if your baseline is $3,000 a month, that's $36,000 a year. Using that rough 4% framework, you'd need about $900,000 invested to cover it. And I know, your brain either goes, that's impossible, or, okay, that's a number I can at least aim at. But don't miss what just happened. We made freedom specific. We pulled it out of Fantasyland and turned it into a target your brain can actually work with. Now, here's the part that messes with people. The hidden lever in Milestone 3 isn't your portfolio, it's your baseline. Because every permanent dollar you add to your baseline raises the portfolio you need to be free. If you're living on $8,000 a month baseline because you're a high earner and your lifestyle is stacked, you don't need a little more investing. You need a gigantic portfolio to replace that life. Meanwhile, someone making less but living on a stable baseline needs a smaller portfolio to buy the same piece. So you get this super counterintuitive reality. The lower earner can reach freedom first, not because they're better at investing, because their denominator's smaller. And that's not a moral statement. It's just math. And this is where the documentary part gets kind of emotional, because you start seeing why people are so anxious even when they're doing well. They don't just have bills, they have a lifestyle machine. And the machine needs feeding. And once you build the machine, it's hard to shrink it without it feeling like failure. So people keep running. They keep chasing the next raise. The turning point is when you stop treating wealth like a flex and start treating it like an escape route. Wealth isn't built by people who are obsessed with being rich. It's built by people who are obsessed with not being trapped. They don't just ask, how do I make more? They ask, what am I buying with this? Am I buying comfort right now? Or am I buying options later? And yeah, sometimes that means saying no to things you can afford. That's adult life's worst feature, but it's also how you stop feeling like your job owns you. If you want to apply this without becoming a finance robot, you don't need a personality transplant. You just need to get specific about 3 numbers. How much you have invested, not saved. Whether you're near that $10,000 ignition point or still fighting the motivation desert. Whether you're near $100,000 net worth and at risk of celebrating by raising your baseline, and what your baseline monthly expenses actually are. And if you're sitting there thinking, I'm behind, I need you to hear this cleanly. Behind is not a character flaw. Behind is usually just the result of playing a game where nobody showed you the actual rules. Most people are taught to focus on income like it's the scoreboard, then they're confused when the people with the most peace aren't always the people with the biggest paychecks. The real scoreboard is milestones. 10,000 invested, 100,000 without the lifestyle trap. And then the quiet end game, passive income, covering baseline.
Progress beats perfection. Every time. And the nicest part about milestones is you don't have to feel ready. You just have to move. Because one day you're going to open that bank app the same way you always do, expecting the same old flat feeling. And you're going to realize the numbers started moving. Like they've been waiting for you to stop sabotaging the windows. And if you want to keep going, I've got another video coming that connects this to something people don't talk about enough. Why some people do everything right and still feel money anxious. And the answer is not more hustle, something quieter, something psychological. The kind of thing you only notice after you've crossed the first milestone and your brain finally stops lying to you about what's possible. If that sounds like you, you'll probably want to catch the next one.